Hello and welcome to the Brave Business podcast, brought to you by the accounting, tax, audit and advisory firm Blick Rothenberg. Brave by name and brave by nature, this series is different. Aimed at entrepreneurial businesses, we focus on providing market updates, practical guidance, timely insights and professional opinions from industry experts, helping you make informed decisions about your business. I'm Declan Curry, journalist and broadcaster. This year marks the 50th year of full diplomatic relations between the United Kingdom and China. China, of course, the great economic success story of the last 30 years. It's a huge market for British businesses in everything from technology to luxury food products. However, it can be challenging to enter. As a result, many British entrepreneurs are looking to establish relationships with Chinese businesses newly established in the UK as a gateway to China as a market. So what are the key opportunities for UK businesses looking to work with Chinese businesses in the UK? What are the challenges and how can they be avoided? To discuss all of that and to draw out some of the more tantalising insights, we have Blick Rothenberg's head of China desk, Winnie Chow, and that company's audit director, Adam Wildbore, and also joined by a senior advisor on China strategy, Jack Yu, from the law firm King and Wood Mallesons. Welcome all three of you to our discussion. Jack, let's start with you. You're our guest on this particular podcast, and we've chosen you with great care.
Thank you.
What makes you a China expert? You've had such a great sort of experience of working there and knowing the country.
Yeah, I think I'm China born and bred to start with, and dealt with China issues for the last 40 years or so. I hope that experience, I wouldn't claim in the word authority, but bring some experience I can bring to the conversation.
And your experience of China, you'd be much too modest here because you were in the diplomatic service, you've worked at the British Embassy in China as well, so you know it really, really well as a diplomat. When we talk about the opportunities in China, what's the scale?
Yeah. So talk of China is we're here, we see the headlines. The China is the largest exporter in the world, second largest economy, or soon going to overtake the USA, depends on which economist you listens to. China is still growing, slowing down admittedly, but it's growing above GDP growth above 4%. Looking at us, we are contracting, edging into recession. So still lots of economic opportunities there. In the big opportunities, I would also draw attention to, of course, we know that China has the largest population in the world, 1.4 billion, but also the growing and increasingly affluent middle class. Some stats say it's about 700 million middle class Chinese people. So I would say that consumerism in China, that 700 million Chinese middle class, their interests, their habits could be an opportunity for British companies looking to Chinese market.
I will bet that there are some entrepreneurs, some businesses listening to this podcast who will see the scale of the opportunity and may actually be a bit daunted by it. It's so big. China can seem as a almost forbidding prospect.
Understandably, yeah, it's sort of so far away as well, different culture and language. So I think my job is largely is twofold. One is to help British companies go into China to the full life cycle of establish yourself, market entry, set up a joint venture, or sometimes get out of China. The other, on the flip side, so it's a new trend. I think Winnie and others can talk a bit more. Is that there are increasingly more Chinese companies coming to the UK, set up in the UK. It might be new partnerships on your home turf to form, or sometimes Chinese companies or investors might become your equity shareholders. So that presents new opportunities and challenges for British companies here as well.
And Winnie, this is when you come into our conversation as well. You're head of the China desk at Blick Rothenberg, and you work with Chinese companies coming to Britain.
Yes, day in, day out. And I guess my role is also twofold. I predominantly serve Chinese businesses and also individuals who come to establish in the UK and invest. But being born and brought up in China, I can see the other side of the story as well. So I came to the UK 14 years old, coming to join the joyful GCSE exams. But throughout my career, I've always worked in the UK. So from a career perspective, I feel more in line with British businesses who are trying to trade with China. And through doing that, but also with my Chinese identity, I can always see the opportunities, but also some of the anecdotes and challenges when dealing with China. So I would definitely echo with what Jack says. China does seem very complicated and can be daunting for someone who's always set up their business and run fairly well in the UK and Europe. But the business culture difference does mean that when they trade directly with, let's say, someone in Shanghai or in Beijing, they may get very lost and puzzled.
And this is the core of our discussion, is the idea that British businesses that are interested in China can draw on the expertise that exists in Chinese companies in Britain. How do those conversations start?
Yeah, exactly. So let's imagine if I were a British business producing luxury tableware. And I want to grab the market of the 700 million people in China by selling my lovely tableware to them. If I were to try to find the right person in Shanghai to help place my tableware onto the high-end department store, it will firstly take a lot of time. And secondly, I may end up with the wrong person and they may not be running the social media promotion in the right way. Instead, if I ring a couple of friends and speak with some PR agency in London, but it's a bilingual PR agency who knows exactly how Shanghai works and which magazines you can place your advert, and they will know the people who can make your tableware a success story in China. Then firstly, you save all that time trying to identify the right business partner. Secondly, this bilingual PR agency is likely to know how you operate, so they will make your life easier by speaking your language and not demanding you to go through a lot of Chinese business cultural ritual, which we'll probably come on to later. And you get access to a phenomenal market.
And if I may, I would add, sometimes a British company may find if you are relatively strong in your field, have good products and good name, sometimes Chinese entrepreneurs may find you. They might approach you. So you don't need to be proactive. Well, of course, to be good to be proactive, I was following Winnie's advice. But occasionally, or sometimes, you quite often, you get approaches from Chinese entrepreneurs.
So it's a two-way conversation.
Correct.
Adam, I get the sense that the message so far is it's a great opportunity, it's a great potential, but you can't just blunder in.
No, absolutely not. Winnie and I, for example, have a mutual client that is a PR agency run by two Chinese nationals that came to the UK, introduced by an existing client of myself. So they acted as the intermediary, but they've got some very good work with working in Shanghai because they have the language, they have the skills, they know the cultures, and they know the traditions. But they were approached by a relatively large craft brewery company based in the UK that wanted to increase their prominence and their footprint in mainland China, and they used our intermediary to do that because of the connection. So you don't need to be all singing or dancing a very large international firm and a large UK-based firm. They're just a husband and wife outfit that have been a good success story, and almost demonstrates sort of what we're discussing here.
Okay, so you need to spot the opportunity. You then need to do your homework. Winnie, just walk through some of the practical aspects of this with me. How do you are that British company making tableware or whatever else it is. How do you do your market research? How do you find out who your consumers in China might be and what they want?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this question in itself probably will have very different answer, but I would say make use of some of the freebie information on the table. So there are some very long established agencies in the UK, such as China-Britain Business Council, they offer these sort of market access information and branches all over China. So they can provide you with some of the living knowledge and some know-how. Secondly, I think China is at a stage where social media's power is very, very great. So again, you could always have these initial one-to-one conversation with the market insider, and they can probably point out to you, okay, for your part of the market, you may need to have a social media account on WeChat, maybe on Little Red Book, so on and so forth. So I would encourage speaking with someone who is already operating in this industry. What I didn't want to see is, I get this sense every now and then that there are some fantastic quality British businesses. When they think about China, they know it's a huge market, but they're just afraid to make that first step because they are probably making this an overly challenge for themselves. But as Adam says, actually, it might be just talking about it might be just to do with talking with a small to medium boutique firm. And there are lots of these boutique firms now in London and beyond because of the sheer number of overseas students from China who has had a higher education here, decide to stay in the UK and bridge between the two countries.
So, Jack, again, drawing on the pool of expertise that already exists in the UK about China.
Indeed, I think that's to some extent is a shortcut. And of course, if you want to start on your own, go to China, lots of money and cost and effort into market research to establish right links. But why not look at the new model as a sort of low-hanging fruit, if you like? Especially, I think, when you mentioned the students' population in the UK, sort of they speak the same language, educated in the British way, have similar kind of values and ethos. So it's probably easier through their connections. They can be a good channel to reach China market.
Just trying to think through this as someone who might run a business. Again, the practical considerations. How do you manage the supply chain? How do you make sure that your goods or your services can be delivered on the ground? How do you make sure you get paid and you get the money back? Either of you talk through some of those.
I talk about getting paid maybe first. I think because that's often a sort of myth for lots of British companies. Because Chinese RMB is not pegged. It's not easy to get money out of China. For example, individual citizens in China every year want to have a quota of $50,000 of quota to get that exchange to foreign currency. That said, if it's trade-related, what you're talking about mostly is trade-related. It's a different account. If it's trade-related foreign currency, normally Chinese companies can get that changed with Chinese banks relatively easily, and then you can get paid just like you do transactions with francs or Germany.
Winnie?
Yeah, sure. So on payment, I've actually got some examples. So like British businesses, I'm also representing a tax firm in the UK, trying to sell tax advisory, accounting services to Chinese clients. Some of them living in the UK, but a lot of them living in China. Now, they would prefer to pay using their Union Pay card. So what I did is actually I spoke with our finance department. In fact, a lot of the payment company and payment solution companies, they could build in that Union Pay additional feature. So I was able to offer to my Chinese clients saying, you can pay by Visa or MasterCard, but if you don't have that sort of international facility, you could still pay using your Union Pay card. That has been such a popular option that we have been able to offer. So there might be a solution over here.
And Adam, alongside any sort of considerations about supply chain and payment and market research and communicating with customers, you've also got the issue of compliance.
Absolutely. So if let me take sort of business cultures first, because they can also be seen as almost like a hurdle for compliance. So we all know about the ways to present business cards, for example, offer handshakes and meet somebody for the first time, etc. But the actual...
Well, hang on. Let's not assume that we know that.
No, that's true.
There's a particular way of handing over business cards?
There is, yes. It's basically holding both sides of the business card, presenting it to the person that you're greeting and bowing, but the business cards needs to be also in Chinese and also in English.
So you're not just flicking the business
You're
card
not just,
as we tend to do here.
Yeah.
You're carefully handing it over using both hands.
Yes, you're placing it in their hands and they are receiving it, and it's sort of that mutual respect of, here's my sort of offering to yourself as a to start the meeting.
See that's the point. It sounds really trivial, but actually it's about respect. It's about understanding.
Yes, and that hits on my next point really. The Chinese business culture is built on a sort of an ancient Chinese philosophy known as Confucianism. If I said that correctly, Winnie, which is based on the values of solidarity, loyalty, modesty, and courtesy. And in the UK, a lot of our meetings tend to be transactional based. We'll meet a client. This is the tax. This is the audit. This is the service. Here's the letter of engagement. Let's move forwards. Whereas in China, it's all about building the relationship and earning the respect of the processes involved. And it's a slow burn to get to the end. You will get to the end. The transaction is almost assured, but it's understanding those cultural differences and understanding those soft skill sides and the sort of the return versus investment equation, because it can seem it's quite trivial to the UK. Why do we need to go down these routes? But actually, it's a long-term relationship that you're forging.
And Winnie, this is something I've heard from other businesses that are British businesses that are experienced in operating in China. It can take a really long time to develop those relationships, and you've got to do it in person.
Exactly. And sometimes I do feel for those UK businesses because firstly, it can seem a long time. A lot of efforts are put in and they don't have the certainty that the deal can be done. So to give you an example, I'm very often asked by clients who newly arrived from China who still expect me to act in the Chinese way, probably spend hours with them in afternoon tea. They may secretly hint that they expect some sort of personal favor, for instance, do a piece of translation for one of their messages. However, there's no guarantee at that point that they will surely sign up a contract with me. Now, I would say we have to take things with stock. So if you sense this is a great opportunity, then perhaps you do have to leave some space for your patients and do not expect a handshake after one meeting that the deal is done. However, if you think it is not an opportunity you ultimately go for, then I still think everyone, our time is limited. Let's cherish our time. Maybe make it clear to your Chinese business partners saying, look, I'm ultimately looking for this. Is that at all possible? If there is no chance, then, let's just have a friendly conversation about it. So that's my take.
Sorry. And just following up on that, our recent conversation with a lady who came to us about looking for accountancy services, and we said we'd come back to you and quote for that. But then her immediate response was, well, I'm kind of expecting this to be pro bono because I've got so many Chinese contacts and my black book is so big that I will pay you in referrals. And we quite rightly said, actually, no. In the UK, we've got certain compliance and regulatory obligations here. So it's respect is a two-way street when it comes to these conversations.
That's a really important point, Adam. I think sometimes a lot of what we're talking about, I would just caveat is huge generalization. There's no uniform Chinese way of doing business. Like there's no uniform one way of British way of doing business. We're sort of quite to characterize the Chinese way or culture. Largely they are true, but they are sometimes the differences or nuanced approach. So I think what Adam said, you sometimes have to push back as well. You can't just kowtow to the Chinese way. You have to have your standards, British way of doing things. We have regulations, rules here, but be able to feel you can push back politely and make sure you don't compromise your way too much.
At the risk of falling into another stereotype, anything I've been told also includes the need to save face. That if you're delivering bad news or a refusal, you can't just say, nah.
Yeah, I think, again, and say stereotype depends. I think it's the nuance depends on who you're dealing with. If the younger generation, sometimes I have declined younger Chinese, different generations and also different backgrounds. I think you take a deeper analysis to understand the person you're dealing with. Just sometimes follow your instinct rather than there's the rule book. You have to do A, B, C. I think that's normally that'll be correct.
Is there a lot of hierarchy in the culture? Is there sort of an esteem given to older members of the business community? You can't be quite so offhand with that.
Correct. By and large, I think the Chinese respect the elderly, and especially in state-owned businesses you deal with, and there's quite a lot of it's almost operate like a government department. There's normally someone wise and old. Sometimes they don't say much, but they are actually behind the scene making the decision. So that's one of the things I think, being Chinese, you're able to sort of navigate to say what's really happening, not just on the surface, but navigate who's actually, where the power lies, who's actually the decision maker, how you get to that person.
Yes, who is the important person in the meeting? Is it the person doing all the talking or the person who's saying nothing at all?
Well, obviously something in between. I think, it depends. Again, yeah.
This relationship building, so that may be an element of the culture that comes as a bigger surprise for British business, is the need for patience, the need for time, that it can't be straightforward, transactional. And you're talking about things like what? Lots of meals, lots of meetings, family visits. How important are things like that? You're laughing. You think I've fallen into another stereotypical
lots
pit.
of drinking as well. That's a baijiu spirit.
Rice wine. I mean, again, while we don't want to overgeneralize, it can go in, let's say, a spectrum between 1 and 100. The bigger the contract, the deal, and the stronger you want to build the relationship, you could go that extra mile to do family visit over a weekend, which I know a lot of my British colleagues will probably feel it's very strange. We
Intrusive
normally,
almost, yes.
Yeah, like we usually have a strong boundary between our work life and personal life, whereas in China, I think that boundary is a lot of the time blurred, and we are used to that. In order to build the relationship, obviously everyone has their own way, but typically face-to-face interaction wins it all, and over lots of meals, indeed, and in some
and good food,
and very good food. I remember once I was trying to win still my top client. I went to China on business trip. That was 3 years ago, before COVID. And ceremonially, they invited me to dinner. And I knew what was going to happen. There were lots of rice wine. And I had to cheer to the most senior leader. And then after that, the deal was closed without any issue. It's almost a ceremonial. They didn't expect me to drink lots and lots, but they almost feel it's part of the whole process, so that they can fully trust that you are someone they understand and you understand them.
That trust is pivotal to the Chinese business culture. Gaining that trust, knowing how to address the emails. In the UK, you just address an email maybe to the lady first and then the gentleman, but it's having that hierarchy and knowing who is the president, the vice president and the assistants. And as I say, the trust is absolutely key.
Then I think it might be useful to think about, when we talk about Chinese business, we seem to know what we're referring to, but it might be useful to break it down to largely two types. One are Chinese businesses in the UK established by UK-based, maybe Chinese background individuals, such as the PR agency we talked about. They are entrepreneur. They are very likely to have had a UK or English-speaking countries higher education. So they may be able to build relationship directly with you, make decisions, and things may probably all run towards the British style of business dealing. However, there is also a very important part of the Chinese business that we talk about, which are the subsidiaries, branches, and representative office of Chinese-owned conglomerate or groups from China. Now, when you are talking about partnerships, sometimes dealings with those companies may take slower because they may need to report back to their back office. You may need to still have a trip to China to gain the trust with the headquarters to make sure that your business relationship is absolutely smooth.
it occurs to me that there is an imbalance of knowledge and understanding, that the scale of the Chinese market is so huge. If you are a small British entrepreneur or a small British business and you're putting your toe in the water for the first time, it comes back to that point about it feeling very forbidding.
It does, and I think that's where the likes of ourselves in the room and the use of intermediaries and having somebody almost hold your hand to dip your toe in the water before you take the plunge, because as Winnie said earlier, there's a wealth of information on government websites and doing research. Even if you look at some of the larger banks, you go on their websites and they've got pages and pages dedicated to how to free information to go into the Chinese market, and just the business cultures that I've noted down and we've discussed, just so that people are aware of them and then can try and make those decisions to try and balance that imbalance if you can. Just going back a bit to what you mentioned earlier and all of the differences in business cultures and things, I think it's fair to say now that we're dealing with second or third generation Chinese nationals, and the Western way of working, be it right or wrong, has started to infiltrate a little bit, and they're becoming more and more agreeable to some of the Western business practices. So whilst I don't want to scare the listeners by saying we've got Confucianism, you've got the hierarchy, you've got risk aversion, you've got trust, all of that, gift giving and ceremonial practices. A lot of meetings now are done slightly more on the Western side of ways.
Jack, you were nodding.
No, I was also going to just say, if you want your audience to relax, don't hear all the pitfalls of are you sure you receive the business card properly? Actually, for British companies, the Chinese people would normally, as long as you make an effort to show you respect, you're making an effort, they normally give allowance. I think just play your foreigner's card. Just say, sorry, I didn't know that. I made a mistake. They normally give you allowance. No, they wouldn't offend you. They wouldn't be offended if it's genuine business opportunity between you. I
know a wise gentleman I knew had a trip to Shanghai one time and took a load of clocks over there, didn't they?
So that's a no-no, yes? Winnie, clocks are forbidden as gifts.
Well, clock by itself is okay, but gifting clock to friends carries a very bad message. So yeah, please, if you ever think about that,
best avoided. Yes. There are lots of things that Britain makes that Britain can do that China wants, that China finds attractive.
Yeah.
What have we got to offer that's really going to sing?
Sure. So actually, there are research about it. So I'm quoting maybe some stats and information from the latest Towing Tracker report, which looks at Chinese businesses investing in the UK and what they are kind of looking at. You see a trend where they're looking at the healthcare, medical, pharmaceutical, consumer brands, and also education sector, as well as some of the rising AI technologies. You can also see some of the trophy brands that the Chinese businesses love. So as of the latest, you may have read on the news that Li-Ning, a famous Chinese sports brand, have acquired clogs, our very great shoes brand. You also see Royal Exchange, now owned by Fosun Group. So I think Britain does carry a cultural brand. And you may know this, but Downton Abbey was broadcasted in China and it's hugely popular, hugely. So that then brings all the British culture, the etiquette. So that's why I mentioned the tableware just as example, because the British afternoon tea, strangely, tea is from China originally, but British afternoon tea is now an export.
Is this how they think we live? That we're just a whole long episode of Downton Abbey from one day to the next.
Absolutely.
Because I know there are very many Americans who think that's how.
People love a bit of costume drama, I suppose. No, it's not real, but sometimes it's good to have a bit of escapism, if you like. I just say, following on from Winnie's view, I think going back to the opportunities, I think Britain has a huge soft power and a huge brand, which Britain is perceived as being cool, and British products and education and the services, etc. Going back to the point about the Chinese middle class, that consumerism, I think is really need how we British companies can share opportunities of that. Just give you an example. When I grew up in China in sort of late 70s or early 80s, the sort of when you go to a wedding, someone wants to get married, you need to have 3 pieces. Do you know what the 3 pieces are to qualify to get married? So a man, in order to get married, to qualify to get married, he has to present to the bride's family. He's got 3 pieces ready. So they are a watch, and a bicycle, and a sewing machine. So that's sort of say you're affluent enough in the early 80s to afford a middle class family.
I'm guessing nowadays it needs to be something a bit more substantial.
A lot more, yeah. I think you have to. I think there are new 3 pieces. You have to have a apartment, which in Beijing, Shanghai can be a 3-bedroom apartment can be over £1 million. You have to afford that. A very expensive car, and the lavish presents.
And the point of this is to illustrate the almost unbelievable transformation of China's economy.
Indeed.
In little more than a generation.
And that demand for Western food, goods and services, and the hunger for that to consume and buy stuff.
Let's get some top tips. Things that you need to do to be successful in China, things to avoid, common mistakes that can be avoided easily.
I think you need to do, colleagues have alluded to a lot. I think it's about, again, I use that phrase, due diligence. You really prepare yourself. You do research to understand who you're dealing with, what is it really standing for. I think really a lot of free, you don't have to spend lots of money, lots of China British Business Council, or wearing my old hat, the China, British Embassy, the commercial section, Department for International Trade, offers lots of free advice and resources. Do that due diligence is worthwhile. But I will pause here. I'll let you chip in before I come back.
Sure. I've got a tip which may be something that people have thought about, but some British businesses are starting to take interns from UK universities of those who speak Mandarin. That's obviously that doesn't equate to getting very insightful business consulting advice, but it could be a way for the intern to do some market research for you, assess the feasibility, and it's a great way to learn firsthand their network and what they could bring to the business.
I think for myself, it's understanding the cultures, understand the traditions first, and then mould that towards the audience that you're addressing. And then you can't then put a foot wrong, hopefully, because you know where the starting point is, and you can only gain trust and gain respect from that point.
Jack, is it worth the effort?
Of course, I'm biased. Of course, it's worth the effort.
Expertise, not bias.
Yes. I think, yeah, as I said, there's lots of support. It's not as daunting as you think. You get lots of support if you do that correctly. You financially, hopefully, it's rewarding. But even culturally, it's an experience to experience different way of living, different food, as I mentioned. Yeah, it's a life enriching, if you like.
And give lots of gifts, but don't give clocks.
Exactly.
With the clock shoes next time.
Absolutely no clocks. Even without a clock, we knew that the time is up on this fascinating discussion. Thank you very much to Winnie, Adam and to Jack for your input. I'm Declan Curry. This has been the Blick Rothenberg Brave Business podcast. Thank you so much for being part of our conversation.